Welcome to the Revolution Church podcast.
All right, everybody, good afternoon. Welcome to Revolution Gathering. Man, it's been a crappy few days, right? Crappy few days. Found out this afternoon that Paul Rubens, aka Pee Wee Herman, passed away. And, you know, how weird is that? I mean, he's been sick for years, but nobody really knew, or he wasn't really telling a lot of people. But, you know, such a big part of so many of our childhoods, you know, and like the guy who encouraged us to, like, it's okay to be different. It's okay to be weird, you know? And I think about like Pee Wee, and then I think about like going from Pee Wee to like Lollapalooza and getting into punk rock and all that weird stuff, you know what I mean? And like how it was just really opened up those doors for a you know, it was just kind of a journey, man. He like brought us on this journey, and it was like we was exposed to this weird, wild, kitschy art and fun, and we got to like go into his world and go into his mind, and you know, and how incredible was that to have a guy like that? For me, it was like that. It was like, I don't know, you know. I always felt like an outcast as a kid, so it was nice to just feel like you were going to a safe place on TV on Saturday mornings. Anyhow. He will be missed. He truly built a thing, built a lot of, really invested in a lot of us, and we'll miss him. And then we, of course, lost Sinead O'Connor also this past week. And a lot of you may know that Sinead O'Connor was very special to me. She was just a really important artist in my life, and her music and what she stood for, and you know, her story and the basic like redemption of who she really was huge to me. So losing her as well it's kind of like, you know, losing these people from different important periods of my life. Sinead O'Connor never made a bad album, in my opinion, and she spoke truth to a lot of people, and she did it out of the fact that she felt like because she had been given this platform, she needed to speak truth at this platform because there was other people who just didn't have the same platform, you know, and she used it for that, and she paid a price for that. And it's really cool. It's really beautiful when people are willing to like put their careers on the line for their own convictions. I feel like that's not something that a lot of people do much anymore, especially in this economy, you know. So she was a hero of mine, you know, and it encouraged me to kind of want to live my life in a similar way. So rest in peace to those folks. And we also lost, you know, we celebrated my 16th year of my mom last week, and be at passing, and that was, you know, what it was. And we lost Steve 2 weeks ago, and so it's just a lot of death, a lot of loss, and a lot of remembering people. And yeah, there you go. So yesterday I had to play Legos with my kids, so sorry I missed you guys yesterday. Also, it's really hard to do a talk and prepare a talk when the kids are here, so I have to shift things around, and that's what I did. And so here I am on a Monday. Not the most popular day of the week to come here and talk, but it is what it is. Until we can get my schedule worked out to work it. Kids are always going to be first. So one of the things I wrote down here is the first thing I wrote, like I had written a bunch of notes this past Friday because I was getting ready to do a talk, and I was thinking maybe I'll record this talk early, and then I didn't do that, unfortunately. Took a bunch of notes, and then I just kind of skipped those notes and started fresh this morning after I dropped the kids off at their different day camps. And the first thing I wrote out was burnt out, like this feeling of constant burnout that I think a lot of people in this country, in this rat race, and this like trying to keep up financially, trying to keep up your bills, trying to keep up with your family, trying to keep up with these things can happen, and it's not just one of those things like, oh, it's just one of those weeks, one of those weeks or one of those days, so you turn into weeks and months and years. And there seems to be a lot of people who are just, stressed out and there's so much we don't share with each other about our own stress and about our own worries and about what we're going through, it's unfortunate. And so I just wrote like burnt out. That was what I wrote, burnt out, obviously I just, a lot of amazing people who I've been inspired by have gone away in the past few weeks. And what I got out of that burnt out was the next thing I wrote was take the time you have and use it wisely. And you hear this kind of shit all the time, encouragement, like do wisely, take the time you have and use it wisely. But, there's something that becomes alive within death of life in ourselves. When my mom passed away, I was like ready to take over the world. And of course, society comes and says, it's time to move on. And you've got to get back into living like society says, not like, not like the hurt or the pain or, and this urgency. It's no, slow down. It's amazing what society and we do to each other to kind of, cover each other's flame, put a little bushel over. We're just like, oh, let's just calm that down. Sometimes it feels like we don't want other people to make it, or do anything because we're too tired to do anything. And I honestly, at this point, just want to see people do awesome stuff. But take the time you have and use it wisely. Use it wisely to enjoy your family. And that's what I did yesterday with playing Legos with my kids. And we went to the world's worst Taco Bell. And we made the best of it. And, just taking that time and those precious moments and realizing what's valuable in this world. And like through this work, for me, it's like trying to make that normal. Like, let's make that normal. Let's make family first, like kind of a normal thing. You know what I mean? Rather than this like work. I mean, we're seeing like what's come out of that. Like, what's the fruit of that? All these freaking corporations, I mean, Disney, Mickey Mouse, look how freaking greedy these guys are at Disney now. You've got conservatives and liberals now who are both like, can't stand Disney. It's really crazy. That could bring them together. There's a chance to unite. They're both angry at Disney for one reason or the other. So, you're starting to see the fruits of this, of just the greed of like, well, we don't even need people. We could just use AI people, we just lean it down, And I guess we can just all be turned into Soylent Green and to feed the few people that they use to be AI models. I'm kidding. I'm not that crazy, but not yet. But the point is that the rat race is not worth it. It's not worth giving in to all. Give in to what? Find your passion. What is your purpose? What are your calling to? What brings you life? And do it and make the sacrifices to do it, because I do think it's worth it. I've done it for almost 30 years. Like next year, Revolution will have existed for 30 freaking years. I can't even believe it. And it's been hella hard sometimes. There's been peaks. There's been a lot more valleys though than peaks. But for me, every day getting up is worth it, and doing this work is worth it. What it means for me, like, okay, so for me to use my time like wisely, for me, and to really appreciate what I have here on earth, is, and also looking back at like my mother's life and things like that, and the things I missed out from not stopping to smell the roses because I was so busy trying to create a successful revolution. But for me, it's to study well and encourage others because I've studied well, because I understand the truth, to help like expose truth to those who are misinformed. To live a life in grace, and to be an amazing dad, the best dad I can be, and help take the darkness off of others' backs a little bit, help take that share the burden of life with others. I used to want to, change the church and the world, but I've really found out that's just become too hard, and I've been made irrelevant to a lot of people in that world and that community. That's where my life used to be, like my living used to be in there, and that's just not where it is anymore. So there you go. Yeah, it's weird, right? And it matters because I think about the folks who and I'm talking about my work and work like this matters because I think about the people who come up to me and said, I never met your mother, but it meant the world to me, knowing that somebody gave a damn, knowing this, so it's like not every person's called to do the same thing. Like not everybody's called to do this. Like, I don't even know what this is anymore. I used to know what it was. But there's this type of work I find very validating in helping people, encouraging people, seeing people's lives change, seeing people's lives become different, often better. Sometimes they leave the religion completely. Sometimes, they stay in it. Sometimes they go crazy and sometimes they don't. It's always different to see, but ultimately I find it encouraging, this work to do. And it's interesting, but now I'm doing it in a different way where I'm on here talking to you guys and gals and people about this. So one of the reasons though, is I remember years when I was younger, this pastor, like I told this pastor, I said, I don't feel like I have anything in my life. I feel lazy. I feel horrible. I feel depressed all the time. And the guy just looked at me and he goes, I don't think any of those things are true. They might be to a certain extent, but he goes, I think you just don't have purpose. Like you feel like there's no purpose in your life. And I was working at the Gap 9 to 5. I was working at a homeless place. I'm like, I work with the homeless, there should be purpose. Like, am I a bastard? And it was the fact that I had done revolution and started a revolution with my friends, and me trying to get back into that type of work was me working with the homeless in Atlanta. And I was with a guy his name was Philip Bray, who ran Safe House Outreach, that did that work. And I realized, my purpose was doing this revolution thing, working with these folks. Matter of fact, I got a vision for that type of thing when I lived in Atlanta the first time. And so Phil was like, work for me in doing that. And here we are, continuing on. And it's just finding out where your purpose is. If your purpose is an encourager, your purpose might be art, your purpose might be music, your purpose might be like you're freaking good at finances. God knows people need that desperately, It's just different for everyone. It's a different thing. And it's funny, like I think no matter what it is, they're always going to have discouragers who are like, oh, that's not what you should do. Like if you're like a really good, like with numbers and finances, people are going to be like, oh, isn't that just going to be soul sucking and horrible? And you're like, no, this is what I'm passionate about. This is what I want to do. It's like, for me, I remember starting this with my friends in Arizona, and I had this buddy who's this really amazing voiceover guy, but his stepdad would always ask me like, so when are you going to get a real job? when are you going to do something that matters? Like I was doing Revolution. And I heard that voice, and that voice kind of stuck inside my head of like, when are you going to get a real job? When are you going to get a real? So to this day, I think of that. Like when I have to raise funds and things like that, I think like people are probably like, when are you going to get a real job? And I've had what you call real jobs through the 30 years of this at different times. But it's just funny, like it's never real enough, It's never real enough because you have these voices in your head telling you like, oh, you should be in the factory just every day. And I even remember I went and got a job at Little Caesars Pizza making pizzas. I remember going to his dad and being like, hey, I got a real job. I'm making pizzas, and I'm miserable. And I think I lasted like a month or two. And then I was like, I can't do this anymore. It's just not what I'm here to do. Anyhow, point is finding that. It might be an encourager. It might be being a mother. It might be being a father. It might just, all these different things that we find. But often I think those voices in our head are sometimes that are like, sound like evil thoughts or horrible thoughts. Sometimes they're just thoughts and we need to let them pass. But other times they're thoughts of just like, hey, I need to maybe follow this thought. I never thought I'd be, like I was a high school dropout with dyslexia. So I was told I was stupid and slow most of my life. And then I found out I had dyslexia. And then they said, well, you're going to have extra help. And you're always going to have someone help you and do all this stuff. And that was awful news. I found that out when I was like 17, 18, after I'd already dropped out of high school. And I never thought I would be reading like biblical history. Never thought I'd be reading philosophy, and theology, or even fiction at times. I don't read a lot of fiction anymore, but there were just things where I just never thought this would be part of my life. I didn't think I'd write 3 books. I didn't think I'd write 1 book, And yeah, I did need help. I did have to work with writers. I did have to do those things, but it was always like working on finding a way. A lot of people are like, oh, you're hustling, and you're like, yeah, well, I'm hustling, but it's also finding out like there's other people who have purposes too and do things I'm passionate about they love. There's some people who passionately love to write and want to help you write a book. There's people who are passionate about doing different things, and you kind of put together people like that. And I've always felt like that's when Revolution worked best. Like if we ever get a meet in person group again, it's always good to get a group of people who are like passionate about different things, and we work. You work to well like Voltron. Like a team. You get your arm and your leg and your, and you work well. And you're not as good without the other. And I know this sounds all kind of weird and churchy stuff, but it's just the fact that I look at my life and go, I used to want to change the world. I used to want to change the church. And now I just want to encourage you guys to just change the people in your life. Love the people in your life. Think differently. Encourage folks to think differently. And show that grace that we talk about here, and show that love that people say that they saw in my mom or things like that. Be the difference that they see. Hopefully folks will know folks who work at Revolution or attend Revolution by their love. Like we'll get that out of the Gospels. Like we're gonna take the best out of the Gospels, and there's some other crap that we're gonna leave or we're not gonna take. I'm not gonna take. And grace is not an easy thing either, because just because you practice grace doesn't always mean you're going to receive grace. Especially when you're working with jaded, hurt people. I find the 2 hardest people to work with are religious people, and then people who've been jaded and hurt by religion. And unfortunately, those have been the people I've worked with most of my life. But those are some very hard folks to work with. Very hard. And even harder now because I don't even feel like I have a voice in that world anymore. And I'd like to, but I just don't. I feel like it's always, and I try to have these tough conversations, but for so many people, like they're so reactionary because of social media that it's hard to reach out and say anything to anybody. Much less your friends. Like it's hard to say to your friends, like, hey, I think you may have missed something here, done something like that, without them being like, Oh, what are you saying to me? You know what I mean? It's like, dude, it's like we can't, like, we've just become so like afraid of criticism, you know? And I try to embrace criticism, but sometimes I embrace it too well, and people are like, aren't you pissed off? And I'm like, well, I'm trying to embrace criticism. I'm trying to take it. I've learned over life, like, pushing back is not always the best thing, you know? But also saying, like, oh, you're right, I'm a piece of shit is not the best thing either, because they're both defense mechanisms. And I see some of the conversations going on there. I'm just so glad you folks have each other too. It's really a blast to kind of see conversations happening during the talk, because that's kind of like how I always was with just life. Like, I remember sometimes even listening to my headphones when I was at my dad's church. He probably wouldn't have liked that, but anyhow. But find your purpose, and I like I said again, it's never easy. Never easy. I'd like to continue that. I'd like to continue my own work. I'd like to continue the work that I do, that I'm passionate about, and that I feel like I have a purpose for. And it's tough, you know, and I have to depend on you folks. Like, hey, I need financial support so we can continue to do this. And that's the model that was handed to me down from years. Maybe there's a different model, a better model, but that's the model I have had for years, and are still using that kind of church model, even though we're kind of in a different area right now. And we'll have to just see where the future takes us with that. Maybe there's a different model. We could do TV shows with commercials and then just not really say anything to offend anyone. You know, this is my struggle, and this is what I wanted to get to, and this is where the heart of the talk lives, is right about here. Is I continue to see many folks, you know, sowing discord, though, and this is the hard part about following your passion, is so many people, if they don't share the same passion as you, or you know, this type of thing, they can turn on you. So I continue to see so many people, so many folks sowing discord. I actually muted somebody just today, and the reason I muted them, it's like they're really, you know, they're a theologian and this and stuff, but I just see like this discord, like constantly being sown, in the scapegoating continuously happening, and it's like, it's crazy, you know. And so I was thinking, and one of the verses I think about, and I always remember one time I was defending my buddy Tony Jones, which obviously he needs defending half the time because he's a type A personality. He doesn't need defending, but I've defended him. And I was on the phone with somebody, and I was talking to him, and I used this verse. And this verse is something I remembered from, like, I really didn't start getting into the Bible until I was 20, probably like 19 or 20. You know, before that it was like, it's okay, whatever, kind of repetitive. And God hates me, so there's really no reason for me to read it. But one of the things I heard a lot, and I think it's because I saw what my parents went through so much in my life, was Proverbs 9. And it was Proverbs 9:19. And I'm surprised I don't have it. You're kidding me. I must have written the wrong one down. No, it's Proverbs 6:19. There is no 9:19. 6:19. Dyslexia at its best. I just saw it and it turned the 6 into a 9. So yeah, you gotta deal with that shit. Living life on life's terms as well as following your passions. If I can do it, that's what I've always said to people. Like, if I can do it, there's probably a really good chance you can do it even better. 6:19. A lying witness who testifies falsely, and anyone who sows discord in the family. And before that, it says a heart that devises wickedness. I think it's my child you have given pledge. It's just things that God doesn't like and God doesn't approve of in the Old Testament. And this one here is 19, is a lying witness who testifies falsely. So a liar, basically when we lie about each other and spread lies and spread rumors. And one who sows discord in family. So this idea of playing each other against each other. And I feel like that's all the church does now, is like sow discord. And And it's become one of those things where it's funny thinking about the late Paul Rubens and thinking about Pee Wee Herman, and Pee Wee Herman would always be like, I know you are, but what am I? You know? And I feel like that's the argument for a lot of church people now. It's like when I see it, and I do look into the arguments and watch people argue online and, you know, not for fun, but just to see what people are saying until it gets to the point where I'm like, ugh. But sometimes I look around and see that stuff. And it really is boiling down to like, no, I know you are, but what am I? I know you are, you know, like, oh, you think we're groomers? Well, actually, you're groomers, you know, like your youth pastor married a girl when she turned 18, you know, well, who's grooming now? You know, and it's like everybody's just returning barbs with each other. And it's like, you know, it's like, if there was as many groomers as both of these people are talking about, we would all be really screwed. You know, and I've seen situations on both sides, badly, but I've seen mostly positive, and usually there's always a story or something. But point is like, we just love to be like, no, what you're accusing me of, you're doing, you know, you're just as bad, or you're even worse, you know. And it becomes like this cycle. It looks like the recycling thing where it's like arrow, 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 you know, and it just continuously goes on. And every other person is this arrow of going like, no, you did, you know, it just continues. It's this cycle of like, oh, okay, well, the church is just two different sides. It's a family that's got two different sides, and they just continuously accuse each other of being the problem. The problem is when that becomes the cycle, then that's the problem. And I can see a lot of problems. And I would say, like, I feel like probably the conservative side probably has more problems than the left side. But now I'm starting to go like, maybe we both just have an equal problem, and we need to sit down and figure out how to deal with this. And it's not by pointing fingers at each other all the time. Here's a cool thing about the Bible. It says all fall short of the glorious grace of God. All fall short, not some. It says all fall short. So no shit, Sherlock. Yeah, they're bad, you're bad, we're all bad. We all fall short. But yet God in his gracious kindness declares us not guilty. Boom, you know, there you are. So let's sit down and have tough conversations and try to work this thing out. I think that's why people like Dan McLaren are so important with pointing out, you know, historical facts of the Bible. You know, and the proper scholarship biblically is it kind of helps us see like, oh, okay, because we do have to have a whole group of conservative Christians out there that we do have to sit down with and go like, hey, if you really want to take this thing seriously, here are some facts. You know, and the problem is always like, oh, well, it's always, oh, the scholarship says, and they'll push the scholarship away, and it's going like, listen, if you've been taught in a system that the scholarship is bad, and that scholarship, like, just look at the scholarship, study it, consider the source at least, you know, because that's just a bad defense mechanism of saying, well, oh, you say scholar, oh, you say the Greek, oh, you say the Hebrew, and it's like, these are the factual things behind these things. I mean, it's like math. It's like I'm not making it up, you know, but at least there's a little bit more room than math to have the discussion of these issues. You know, but we need to have these discussions of like, oh, Christianity has appeared to be one thing and it's really not. So maybe this is the reformation we need, is to expose the truth of what Christianity is. And it's not all what the left or what people like me have said for years either. Like there's points that we miss as well. And it's like, let's get together and see, you know, the adventures in missing the point and move forward. You know, we want to move forward properly, you know, educated and, well, you know, understanding each other more. And realizing there might be a common ground here. So not sowing discord, I think, is important. And I see a lot of discord sowing. I see a lot of biting and devouring one another by pretty progressive Christians. You know? Like I see them really, like they get bit and they bite back twice as hard. Like they're getting revenge. And through their work and being snarky and not even funny, but trying to be as hurtful as the people who've been hurtful to them. And that is not the way of Christianity. That might be a way to live, but if you want to live that way, go ahead. But to claim that this is the faith, that it represents Christianity, or that somehow this is how Christ acted, or somehow this is how the disciples wanted us to live, or somehow this is the religion of faith of Christianity, is not it. You know, Jesus said, hey, there'll be know you guys belong to me for your love for one another, not by like how cool your comebacks are. You know, it's one thing to be like, you know, in Ireland, you know, everybody takes the piss and give each other a hard time, and it's really cool and it's really fun, and it's like that's how they express love, you know. But that's not what we're doing here. We're not taking the piss out of each other. We're literally beating each other over the head with just different translations and different versions and different understandings. And I think the thing to do is we have to humble ourselves and learn and be willing to relearn and unlearn some of those things that we've learned. As the great Yoda said, you must unlearn what you have learned. You know, Star Wars Yoda. And there's one more verse that kind of always, for some reason, I've always connected this other one to. I don't know why I've always connected them together. Because they have no connection. I mean, I guess Peter would have known the author of Peter would have known the Proverbs more than likely. But in Peter, where are you, Peter? You're not in Revelation. You're way before that. Corinthians, Ephesians, Philippians, Timothy, Hebrew, James. Is Peter after James? Yes, it is. Let's see. Was it 1 Peter? I didn't write that down. Let's see. 3:15. Yes, it is. 1 Peter 3:15. And for some reason, these two have always been connected to me. For some reason, connected for me in my mind. But in your hearts, sanctify Christ as Lord. Always be ready to make your defense to anyone who demands it from you, and accounting for your hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and reverence. Keep your conscience clear so that you are maligned those who abuse you for your good conduct in Christ may put to shame. So what he's saying is be gentle and be humble in your response. You know, be gentle with how you respond to each other. Show humility, you know, so those who attack you actually kind of be humbled in that. You know what I mean? It's basically saying, like, you're not going to get anywhere if you attack them back. So when you're attacked, when you're said, well, give me why you believe this, tell me why you think this, you know, what's the source? Give me the source, you know, source. You know, okay, well, here's the source of what I'm understanding. This is where I get it from. And gently, and do that in a gentle and humble way. Because we miss that, you know. Now, what does this have to do with following your purpose and things? But it really is connected. It's like, why do you follow your purpose? Why do we follow it? Why do we do things? Why do we treat each other different ways? You know, and to me, these verses kind of say, like, if you're going to follow in this way, you're going to do these things, find a gentle and humble way to do these things. And that's my opinion. I think it's very valuable for us to follow our passions and purpose. And people will try to crush us in our passions and our purpose. And often it will be out of, like, unconsciousness of just jealousy or just not, you know, this isn't how the world works, you know, and they tell you things like that. And but then one day you wake up and it's been 30 years and you still don't know if you're going to be able to do the same thing tomorrow that you're doing today. But you've done it. You've put the work in. And what I hope by giving gentle and humble answers, by being caring about other people, by not throwing it back in their face or sowing some sort of discord with, well, my truth is the ultimate truth type of idea, is that you may actually be able to give them some hope, and that they may go, oh, maybe I'll take a different way of looking at that. But if we're both calling each other like sexual predators and groomers, probably not going to change much, you know? If we're, you know, you're a bastard. No, you're a bastard. No, you're a bitch. No, you're a bitch. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, we'll just keep fighting. And so that's why right now this is like Revolution Gathering is like the sidelines. It's like, well, we're not going to play the game. This is not the game. This is not the religion. This is not what it's supposed to be. This is something different. So we're going to go over here and we're just going to be a gathering and we're just going to look and we're going to go, what can we learn from this? What can we learn from going, okay, we don't want to do that. So what can we learn from that? And what I've realized in my life, fashion and art and all these things is a lot of times how I've grown in my life, in my work, in my music tastes, is by seeing or hearing things that I don't like and by kind of subtracting. You know, oh, I don't like the way that looks, so I'm not going to wear that. Or what if I wore that with that? You know what I mean? Or what if you put that with that? And that's sometimes how musicians go like, oh, I don't really like this, but there's something in there that does. You know, what if we just took this beat? I like that beat. Let's take the rest out, you know? And what if we put that beat with this? Or what if we painted this with that? You know, and so for me, a lot of it's been taking it and trying not to be judgmental about the subtraction of just saying like that's not for me, you know. And so seeing when you see these things and you see the way people, for me, it's going like that doesn't work. But I see something. I saw something in Dr. King, so I love this. And Brian McLaren said this, and I really liked that. And you know, and I read and I heard this in a song, and I think this makes sense, and I think there's a way to speak about this and actually bring this song into living, you know. And because for me, it's like musicians and actors and comedians and other types of painters and things like this are just as influential to me as scholars and philosophers, to be honest with you. Like, I'm inspired by it all equally. I've had films change my life just as I've had great philosophy change my life and great theology change my life and great biblical passages, you know. So I take these things together and I take the things that I like and it's not just saying like, well, I'm a cherry picker, but right now I am kind of talking about cherry picking, going, oh, I'm saying taking the best of the best. Now, if there's a hard truth with that cherry, you've got to take them both together, and often that happens. You know, there's going to be a hard truth with following your purpose and your passion. There's always going to be someone there to say, grow up, this isn't what you're supposed to do, you know. So I want to get out of the balance, the yin and the yang of the church, of the conservative and the liberal yin and yang, that they just separate and never, you know, and we've balanced it. We've got the angry Christian, both sides are angry at each other, and they brought balance to the force. I do not want balance in the force. I want to see ridiculous amounts of love and grace, even when disagreements are happening, and ridiculous amounts of respect. And people go like, oh, they're almost too compassionate to each other when they disagree. You know, they almost give each other the benefit of the doubt too much when they disagree. You know, that would be nice. And we don't see that. And, you know, not that Jesus didn't have some sick burns. I mean, he did. But those were always with the hope of bringing people together. Like when he was talking to the Pharisees, he said things sometimes harsh to the Pharisees because he knew that that was the only way to get through to them and for them to hear it. Unfortunately, nowadays, we take that idea and we're so harsh to each other that it doesn't change anybody. You know, we're so mean to it and so judgmental. We've heard it all before, especially with like social media and stuff like that. You hear people say the sickest crap. I was just reading this article with John Lydon, and his wife just recently passed away, and she had horrible dementia, and her body gave out finally. And he was saying, like, on social media, I had people telling me, like, that's what you get for marrying a woman that was 10 years older than you. And I mean, just people are just shit sometimes. And I think what we've got to do is we've got to kick against the shit. We got to kick against the pricks, and we got to say, let's take away some of this darkness. Let's be a light that shines hopeful. And I think that's what people found in people like my mother, is that when she could go to a gay bookstore, even though she wasn't like saying like, oh, gay marriage should be legal, or she wasn't fighting the fight, she was still there. And she would be like, oh, I love you, honey, or oh, God loves you just the way you are, you know, and that kind of thing, of this light in the midst of all the darkness, when everybody else was saying like, you're sinful, you're bad, this is going to destroy, you know, she's just saying, God loves you. You know, she wasn't trying to make a super philosophical point, even though she really was. And she wasn't trying to make a big super duper theological point or argue theology or sin or this or that. She wasn't trying to do that. She was just loving people. Ultimately, she was doing those things. She just didn't know that she was by doing that, by saying love is going to triumph all of these things. And people will know this love. And that this love comes from Jesus. That was pretty freaking radical, and she didn't even realize she was doing it. So often what we're called to do is you might think, well, I've just called to do this simple thing, and then the next thing you know, you were one of the greatest philosophers and theologians who ever lived, because you lived in a way that confounded the wise. And the Bible talks about that stuff, So sometimes the word will use what the world considers foolish to confound the wise, and I think my mom has been one of those people, So hopefully we can start also helping folks realize a lot of the things that we're talking about, we're arguing about, and we're fighting about are like these great distractions, and that we major in these minor things, and we often get so caught up in identity politics that we forget about the poor. We forget about people who are in poverty. We forget about the freaking drug addicts who are like roaming the streets. Like in Seattle, I've never seen such bad drug addiction anywhere. I don't think in any city of my life. And I lived in Atlanta when there was homelessness was horrific in Atlanta, but there are so many people who are on heroin or opiates and different things like that who are dying, and it's like they're just dying, and people are losing their homes and these things like this, and we don't realize like this is ultimately like this is happening to conservatives and liberals and gay and straight and bi and trans and black and white and Hispanic. People are struggling and losing their homes and falling victim to drug addiction. And if we look at the world and we see what's happening in different countries where religions are literally oppressing people and oppressing women and taking away beauty salons, killing each other. If you question them, look what happened when they ripped up the Quran. People paid, people died, people got killed, buildings got burnt down. It's like I feel like we don't look at the bigger picture, and that we don't live within the perspective, and that we often major in minors and just tear each other down over these minors. And if we were able to focus more on some of these horrific things that are happening all over the country and all over the world, that it might have us come together and go like, oh, yeah, we were really insensitive to these issues. Maybe we really did miss the point, or maybe we can talk about this now that we've looked at some of these other things. But the great thing is you might be called for those things. And that's what's awesome, is that might be your purpose, is for some of the things that are distractions. And you might be saying, well, my call is to go in and help solve those. And so because those are important, and you're right, they are very important. And then some of you might be like, well, my calling is to go and work with the homeless, or help solve this homeless problem, or help change the government, or to go into government and make these decisions and help make changes that actually freaking matter. Help people get affordable health care, help people get affordable housing that's not even just affordable, but that it's decent and that they're shown respect and love. I had affordable housing in my last place, and I wasn't shown a lot of respect or love or caring. Like the people who owned the place just did not give two shits about the people who lived there. And that was tough to be in that for almost, 3 years. So anyway, I guess today may be a bit of a rant. I didn't mean it for it to be a rant, but I meant for it to make sense. And it does in some ways come together in a beautiful way, is that because it's coming out of one person's brain right now. Is how do we work this out? How do we have the conversations that we need to have? It always boils down to that. How do we have good discussions? And how do we live in perspective yet follow our purpose and our calling? And really, it comes down to it's going to sound silly. It's going to sound ridiculous. Are you ready? Loving your neighbor as yourself, and realizing that your neighbor is sometimes a jerk, and sometimes, a right-wing conservative, or sometimes a woke liberal, and they're neighbors, and now they have to love each other kind of like they love each other, like they love themselves. And, here's ABC's new hit comedy. I don't know. Think about it. Thanks for joining me this week. Listen, I want to continue this. Revolution wants to continue this. And in order for us to continue this, we do need your support, your financial support. You can go to revolutionchurch.com and you can go to the donations and hit us up there. You can also share us on Twitter and they're all changing names now. X, I guess, and Instagram and Threads. I'm on Threads. Jay Baker on Threads. You can follow me on Threads. And you can retweet or rethread or re-X or I don't even re-Instagram or put them up in your stories or whatever and share this with people, and that helps a lot. But financially supporting us will help everything we do become better and help Revolution grow more and give me more time to do this type of thing and to work with you guys and tighten this stuff up and continue the work that we've done for 30 years and see what the next chapter looks like. So thank you all so much, and I will see you next week, and I'll have a lot more time to work on my talk, so I'm very excited about that as well. So see you next week, everybody. Love you, Mott's. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being present. This work does not exist without you. So I hope you know that you are as much of Revolution as this talking head is. We don't survive without each other. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. To make your 100% tax-deductible donation today, please visit revolutionchurch.com/donate. You can also learn more by clicking the donate section on the website.